guys could see me. It doesn't look like you guys can see me from the chat. Technical issues. Yeah, it looks like you guys can't see me. That's so weird. Huh. Let me see what's going on. Let me just go in the Slack team page here. It looks like you guys can't hear me. Let me see what's going on. That's so weird. Yeah, let me know that. Yeah, I don't think you guys can hear me. Huh. That's super weird. And let me just check my settings to make sure that everything is okay on my end. Okay, so you can't. Oh, there I am. So I am here. All right, looks like there might be a big delay for some reason. So if you can hear me, let me know. Okay, cool. You're saying you can see me, Sam. So I'm just gonna go and just let me know if something weird happens. But yeah, for some reason, things were not working with YouTube right now. But it looks like you can see me. All right, sounds good. So let's just get going with it. Sorry about that rough start. But yeah, welcome back to another Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. I am your host, Jesus Ramirez, as I said earlier. And today we're gonna work with Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. Yes, that's right. We're going to work in Lightroom today, not necessarily just Photoshop. However, everything that I'm going to talk about today can also be passed over into the camera raw filter inside of Photoshop. So no worries if you're not a Lightroom user, you can still apply everything you're going to learn today into Lightroom. Cool. So yeah, let me just switch over into my screen so that you can see this page. Behance.net/challenge/Photoshop. I'm going to scroll down and make sure that you download the file from the color gradients box for November 19th. This one right here. I'm going to give you a few moments to download it. Meanwhile, let me check out the chat. Cool. We have Edwin from Massachusetts. Okay, Cheryl can hear you can hear me now. Yeah, that was weird. For some reason, it wasn't going live, and it took a really long time for YouTube to catch up to me, but here we are. Cool. Hello from Bampton, Ontario, Canada. Good to see you, Murray. Awesome. Yes, the Lightroom side of Adobe. Nice one, General Kenobi. Nice one. But yeah, thank you so much for being here with me today. By now, you should have had time to download this file in the Behance.net challenge/Photoshop page. Also, make sure you click on this big blue button to follow along with me, and so that you can get notified via the Creative Cloud app. But anyway, let me just bring the audio player down that's playing the background music, and let me bring up not Photoshop but Lightroom. Here we are in Lightroom, and what we're gonna do today is work on this photo. But actually, you know what? I'm gonna bring in another photo. And it's just this gradient. This one you don't have for download, but I mean, you can just make it yourself. It's just a gradient going from black to white. And I'm going to start here because I think it'll really help us illustrate how this new tool in Lightroom and Photoshop Camera Raw works. So if you go into the edit panel, this one here, it'll bring up these set of these tabs. And from these tabs, we have a tab called color. And this tab controls all the color on your image. The new tab is called color grading. This replaces the old split toning tab, and it allows you to stylize your image. Let me click to open it. By default, you're gonna see 3 color wheels. We have a color wheel for the shadows, for the highlights, and for the midtones. If you see something else, then just make sure you click on this first icon here. And what this allows you to do is apply a color to each one of these tones. So let's start with the shadows. You can see this little circle here. If I click and drag out, I can adjust the saturation. See a little circle in the center? There's no saturation, so the hue doesn't matter because there's no saturation. But as soon as I start dragging out, you can start applying a color to the shadow. See how the shadows are changing color? And if you hold shift, you can constrain the saturation so that you don't accidentally adjust the hue. Another thing you can do is click on this little circle and drag out, or drag in a circle rather, to change the hue. If you want more control over the hue and saturation and also the lightness, which is down here, which will make those tones brighter or darker, you could also click on this first circle, the one called shadows, and now I have a zoomed in view of this control. And again, the shift key constrains the saturation so that I don't accidentally adjust the hue. And if I hold control, that's command on the Mac, you can click and drag around the circle, and now you won't adjust saturation, only the hue. So that is how these sliders work. Then we also have the luminance slider down here as well. So you can adjust those. And also notice this little icon here is really hard to see. When you click on that, you can actually open up a hue slider. It controls what we were just looking at in the circle, and then the saturation as well. See that? And then the luminance is the same thing. I'm gonna go back into the three-way view, and we can now start adjusting the highlights and midtones. Let me show you the midtones. That's really the new thing in this panel. Before we had a highlights, and I think you know how this would work. When you would make an adjustment, you can apply a color to the highlights. But the new feature really is this midtones control, where I can now add a separate color to the midtones. So you can see how the shadows have this green color. Now the midtones have this magenta, and the highlights have yellow. So that is the most powerful thing about this filter, that you can now control each individual set of tones independently. Notice how there is really, the black didn't really get affected, or the white. If you want the black pixels and the white pixels to take the color effect, you have to adjust the luminance slider. So watch how when I adjust the luminance slider to the left, I start bringing in the color onto those pixels. And the same thing is true if I darken up the highlights. Notice how now the white has that yellow effect applied to it. So it's very important that you adjust these controls if you want to make sure that you affect the highlights and the shadows. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. Let me make sure that the stream is going okay. Cool. Yeah, looks like there's no questions. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions. Cool. So now that we have this knowledge, actually I forgot two sliders. I forgot the blending and balance slider. The blending slider just helps you blend the shadows and highlights. You can see how essentially the center color disappears when we blend the tones that we apply to the image. And then the balance slider, if you go into the negative values, the color that you apply to the shadows becomes more prominent. And if you go into the positive values, the color that you apply to the highlights becomes more prominent. So you can adjust this accordingly, like so. And there's actually one more thing that I didn't talk about, which is this one, the global adjustment. So the global adjustment applies an overall tone to the image on top of whatever you applied in the highlights, midtones, and shadows. So if I apply a blue tone, notice how I'm applying the blue tone to the colors that were already there. So it's not going to override the other colors. It'll apply the tones to the colors that you set in the three corresponding boxes here. You can double click on them to reset them. So I'll reset them all. And you can see now how the global adjustment is now just applied to the original image. So you can use the global adjustment to apply a global tone to the entire photo, or you can use it to apply a global color grade to the three previous color grades that you applied, the highlights, midtones, and shadows. I hope that makes sense. Cool. So now let's take a look at the photo that we're going to work with, which is this one here. We have this nice photo of this young lady riding a motorcycle, and we're just going to apply a color grade to it. And you can apply a color grade same way we just did it before. in the edit panel, you have this color panel inside of it, and you can make any adjustments that you want. So we can start by making the shadows blue. We're gonna create that movie look effect, and I'm going to adjust the luminance just to give it more contrast. See how I'm darkening up the image there? Then I'm gonna go into the highlights, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of orange there. Let me just select the right orange right about here and then adjust it accordingly. I don't wanna add too much, just a tiny little bit. And then we can experiment with the midtones and see what works better for this image. So maybe stay in the cool colors. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stay in the cool colors for sure. So maybe just a tad bit of teal, not too much, just a tiny little bit. And again, I can adjust them as well just to darken it up. And just like that, we were able to apply a nice color grade to that image. And I think that the midtones might be just a little too much, so I'm gonna bring that down. I can always go back into my global adjustment, and I can bring like a overall blue tint to the image. Now, in this case, we're dealing with skin tones. So I would recommend going back into that same, oops, sorry about that. I would recommend going back into that same color panel. And from here, you have the color mixer, which gives you control to adjust the color, hue, saturation, and luminance of all these other colors. So if you go into the orange, I can adjust the hue for the orange and then try to bring her skin tones back a little bit. Maybe adjust the saturation in the oranges as well. Maybe even the yellows since she's blonde, and maybe adjust the hue of the blonde as well, just to get something that pops more in with my background really. And you can make any one of these adjustments that you want. I'm gonna go into the luminance and I'm gonna brighten up the oranges to brighten up her face. So again, before and after. So as you can see, Lightroom is very, very powerful, and you can target all these different colors, add saturation, reduce saturation, increase luminance, decrease it, or shift the hue. So you get a lot of control, as you can see. Let me see if there are any questions in the chat. Let me scroll up and make sure I didn't miss anything. How do I get a blank image with a gradient in Lightroom? Yeah, so what I did there is in Photoshop, I just created an image, just like I show you how I did it. Not that difficult. You just create a blank document like so, and then you just do a gradient like this, and then you save that as a JPEG and import it into Lightroom. So not a big deal at all. Cool. No helmet. Yeah, this is an action movie. Action stars don't wear helmets. No, I'm just kidding. You should wear your helmet. Do we have you can use Camera Raw. You don't have to use Lightroom for this challenge. I just wanted to show you guys that you could also do everything in Lightroom, but in you can do it in Camera Raw. And let me just show you what this looks like in Camera Raw. Actually, let me just, I'll use a different photo, I guess. Let me just open up an image here. I mean, I guess the photo really doesn't matter, but let me see what I have here. I mean, I guess we can use, I don't want to use something with a watermark. I guess we can use, here, we'll use this photo that we use for, that I use for different projects, actually a composite. But anyway, if you wanted to do, it's already color graded, so I guess it's not the best photo to use for this. But if you go into, actually, yeah, I don't want to use something that's already color graded. But I guess I could use. Let me see what I have here. Sorry about that. I'm just gonna put in person and see what comes up. Or man. How about just put the word man? I put the word man and this city came up, but I guess we'll use this city. So the way that this will work in Lightroom is, first of all, convert it into a smart object so that you can work non-destructively. Then you can go into filter, camera, raw filter. And from here, you're going to see that the split toning panel is no longer here. Now we have the color grading panel, and you have the same controls, exactly the same. There's no difference. The icons are the same. You can click on each individual one. You have the global adjustments. You have this little arrow that shows and hides the hue and saturation sliders, just like in Lightroom. And you can start by, we can apply a similar color effect, right? We could make the darks blue. We can make the highlights yellow, and then we can get crazy and maybe add like green in the midtones or something like that, whatever you prefer. So as you can see, you can make all these adjustments in Camera Raw as well. We have the blending slider in Camera Raw as well, and you can make that adjustment. You can use the balance. Again, the balance, if you go into negative numbers, you increase the shadows, so then the tint that you apply to the shadows will apply to more pixels in the image. And if you go into the positive values, then you'll do the opposite. More of the color that you apply to the highlights will apply to more of the image. So you can make these adjustments and see what results you get before and after. Something I should have mentioned in Lightroom, but it's also true for Camera Raw, is that you can go into your presets panel. You can create a preset, and you also can save your adjustment. Here you see color grading. You can just save a color grade you apply using the 3 color grading wheels as a preset, so that you can apply it to multiple images much quicker. So you have that option available. And talking about presets, that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow here at the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. We're going to do presets in Lightroom. So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Let me see if we have any questions. Any other questions? Okay, so that's very good. Yeah, good point there, Frank. You can use, so Frank is saying we can use gradient maps, and we can definitely use gradient maps. In some ways they're more powerful because you can get more than 3 tones, right? So earlier what I did, and I'm not going to remember the colors, exactly the colors that I used, but what we did is I selected, I think, like a blue for the shadows and a yellow for the highlights or something like that. And then the midtones had like a teal color to them or something. And that's basically what I did, but you can change the blending mode to like color or soft light or something else to apply the effect, and then reduce the opacity, and you can make adjustments that way if you want. Now, the advantage of doing it this way is that you have, technically more control, because you can create more points, right? So maybe for whatever reason I want it like red in those tones, I can get that. Something that I wouldn't be able to do with the color grading tool, but it's not as user-friendly. As you can see, I have to adjust the opacity. I have to adjust the different blending modes to get a good result. So it can become a little more confusing, but if you wanted to, you could use the gradient map as well. Please explain the difference between Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. Thank you. Yeah, so the biggest difference is that Lightroom, the one that I'm using now, just Lightroom, formerly called Lightroom CC, is a cloud-based editor. So anything that you upload to it goes into the cloud, and it's synced with your computer, your phone, your tablet, anything that you want. And the Lightroom Classic is geared more for people who are doing like big shoots, like a wedding photographer, an event photographer, something like that. It's a editor based in your computer, in your it's like a hard drive, so to speak, based editor. So I would say that that's the biggest difference. Lightroom Classic has more features, not necessarily in the editing. It has more features that are outside of the editing. In terms of editing, they're about the same, just like with Camera Raw. The features come outside of that, and mostly in the cataloging and organizational capabilities that it has, again, for people who are shooting lots and lots of photos. I guess that's the simplest way I can explain it. Let me see if there's any other questions. Oh, thank you for answering it, Sam. There you go. You were much more eloquent than I was in that description. Thank you for answering that question, Sam. Cool. Yeah. Okay, cool. No more questions. Oh, and I'm looking at the time. I only have like 2 more minutes. But yeah, before we finish, I do want to mention, let me bring up my browser. There's a couple things I need to mention. First of all, I already talked about the behance.net/challenge/Photoshop page. Make sure that you click on the community chat so that you can go into Discord. And from Discord, you can submit your work. When you submit your work, make sure that you go into the current challenge tab right up above my head there, and that you submit your work. I can see some black and white to color colorizations that we did the other day. We can see the album covers as well. So thank you so much for submitting your work. Oh, this is really cool as well. Awesome. Yeah, so thank you for submitting your work. Again, that is on Discord. Make sure that you leave your questions, and make sure that you just come in here and join the community. Also, make sure that you upload your project onto Behance. Click on Create Project and use the hashtag #PSCreativeChallenge, so that you can have an opportunity to be featured in the curated community gallery. You could also do that for the XD and the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenges. And if you haven't already, follow me on Behance, behance.net/JRFromPTC, behance.net/JRFromPTC. And on the bottom left here, you can see all my links, and you might be interested in clicking on my YouTube channel. On my YouTube channel, I post Photoshop tutorials, so make sure that you check that out. And also, something I should have up, I'll be back on today with Claudia from Print My Soul, and Claudia and I are going to be doing another rework stream. So our Rework It show is a show where we take your Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign files, and we rework on them live on the stream to help you improve them, and hopefully give you some good tips and tricks. So make sure that you submit your work. Click on this green button, add your name, your info, and submit your files. Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. So make sure that you do that now before the next stream starts. Sorry about that, wrong button. The next stream will be photo compositing with Farah. Then we have Claudia from Print My Soul. Claudia, we were just talking about just a moment ago. I was just talking about her. That's going to be the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge. And then we have Lily Garcia doing the editorial design. The XD Daily Creative Challenge will be at 2 p.m. Pacific with Jesse Showalter. And make sure that you stick around for Kyle T. Webster to do a draw along at 2:30. And like I said, I'll be back with Claudia from Print My Soul at 3 p.m. Pacific. Cool. So thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys again in just a couple hours. So make sure that you stick around for Farah. She's up next. Go submit your Rework It file at Claudia's website. I am claudia.com/reworkit, and come back for the stream. I hope that you enjoyed today's Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge, or I guess you can call it a Lightroom Daily Creative Challenge. And I look forward to seeing your color grading results on Discord. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you guys again in just a few hours or tomorrow at another Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. Bye, everybody.